Hi, thank you so much for joining me in the Louis File today. Oh my gosh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a good one. I hope my water's not in the shot there. Um, you know, Today I'm going to share with you a little bit about something that is fairly recent in my study or my awakening or enlightenment, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. The nature of learning means that you don't know something and you search it out, or someone tells you something, right? So I'm so glad to know that even at this stage in my Bible study and Bible teaching, that I'm still open to see and hear new things. I don't ever want to be hardened, locked up, resistant to deeper or more insights from others. So with that being said, today I want to talk to you about covenant union, I guess is what I want to say. Those words might not be new to you. If you're a Bible reader, covenant surely wouldn't be new to you. But let me just start with this verse in Romans 5. Romans 5 verse 12 has really proven itself to be a very important and pivotal pivotal verse in my understanding and teaching of the scriptures. But today I want to talk to you about it in a way that I haven't until just recently really noticed or seen. In Romans 5 verse 12, we see a verse that I've always used in one way, but there's actually something else to be seen here. So let's read it real quickly. Romans 5 verse 12 says, "Therefore, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned." Now, let's just look at this verse piece by piece. Okay, so through one man, or it's implying Adam. So this takes our mind back to the Garden of Eden, with the original rebellion when he was told not to eat of a certain tree, and he did. Sin entered into the world. So I like to say it this way: that sin entered into the world of humanity specifically. So then it says, "And death through sin, so death spread to all men." So right away it's telling us that what Adam did brought sin into the equation of mankind, which subsequently brought in death. So as you keep reading in Romans 5, which I'm not going to do, but Paul is making the case that all of us die because of this. Every one of us will die because of this one act that brought sin and then death into humanity. But what I hadn't really overly thought this out was this last little bit. It says, "because all sinned." For years and years, I've just taken it that in Adam, I committed a sin. And I've taught it this way, that I was in Adam all the way back there. So when he partook of that tree, I partook of that tree. Therefore, I'm a sinner. I'm just born a sinner. And since I'm born a sinner, I need a Savior. Now, I hope I'm not going to make this more confusing than it needs to be. So I brought this question up, and this is why I think I'm just going to read a big portion of a response I got from one of my friends. I did not ask him permission for this. I'm sure he wouldn't care, but either way, I'm just going to leave his name out of it just for the sake of making sure that I'm not talking out of turn with him. So, did we inherit guilt because of Adam? Now, this brings a real problem to this theory, idea, teaching, or whatever about the age of accountability. And if you haven't heard that, then let me just put it this way. At some point in each individual's life, whether you're 3 years old or 6 years old, or some people with learning disabilities might be 30 years old, whatever, you might never get there in some sense if you're retarded, if you have some kind of learning disability that keeps you from that. But at some point, the normal average person will commit a sin. Like, I will steal something when I'm little out of my mother's purse. I will mistreat my sister, knowingly doing it. So I'm looking at my mom's purse. I know that I've been told that's not mine and you can't have it, but I take it anyway. I go in there, I get a piece of gum out. Later on, my mom catches me with the gum and says, "Where'd you get that gum?" And then I lie. I say, "Well, I found it." So sin is a willful act of disobedience. Sin is a willful doing something that you have been told clearly, "Thou shalt not do." It may not be specifically coming out of a Bible or a religious context, but it could just be merely your mother said, "Don't go in your sister's bedroom when she's not home," and then you did it anyway. So you just broke the law, the rule. So if we inherit Adam's guilt, then there is no sense or need of an age of accountability. That just means that if a baby is born, lives to be 6 months old, never makes a willful decision, and they die, then they die a sinner, and according to the scripture, they go to hell. Now, the logical, rational mind is going to have a problem with this, right? They're going to say, well, that doesn't seem fair at all. Why should a little baby die and go to hell for it? Well, this is where the rub comes in with this verse. So we have to account for the age of accountability. We have to come up with some idea. We have to search it out. We have to come to know or understand, how can this work? How can both things be true? How can sin have entered into humanity and caused me to end up dying, but yet I'm guilty for my own stuff? I mean, so this is what I kind of want to bring up today. So my friend says this when he was confronted with this. He is a theologian, and he knows way more than I know about these things. So let me just read what he says here. He says, "I knew of the Latin mistranslation of Romans 5:12 that Augustine used. It does not mean in whom all sinned, like in Adam all of us have sinned, as Latin translated it, but because of whom all sinned." Can you catch the difference? We didn't all sin in Adam, but we all sinned because of Adam. Very good distinction. I agree that the verse does not mean that we became guilty when Adam sinned, like original guilt, nor that we sinned when Adam sinned. He said, but I think there's something else going on here that maybe we haven't thought of. Maybe, could it be that as a race, we became slaves in a covenant union with the devil as a result of Adam's sin? Wow. So that made me think, okay, this brings me to some thoughts that, I've taught all throughout the Louis File channel over the years, and I want to go back through them a little bit again, just briefly. I'm not going to read all these verses. I'm going to tell you where they are. You can look them up yourself if you don't already know. But in Ephesians 2, verses 1 and 2, says that we were dead in our trespasses and sins, and we used to walk like the world walked, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. And we were all by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. And we lived our lives indulging in the flesh and the desires of the flesh, and we were in a problem. So in Ephesians 1, the first few verses of Ephesians 2, Ephesians 2 tells us that we all were dead in sins, and we used to live like the world, which is empowered and operated by another spirit, not God's spirit, but the spirit of the prince of the power of the air, which I think pretty much everyone agrees is Satan. So when we, at some point in our life, we have the wrong spirit operating in us. So we think and feel and operate just like the rest of the world, which is run by the god of this age, the spirit now working in the sons of disobedience, with the wrong spirit in us. In 1 John 4, it tells us that greater is he, the believer, than he that's in the world. So it tells us that there's a spirit in the believer, and there's a spirit in the unbeliever. And it even tells us in 1 John 4:6 that one is the spirit of truth, the other is the spirit of error. So I tend to say that the spirit operating in the children of disobedience in Ephesians 2 is the same as the spirit of error that's in 1 John 4. I just kind of simplify it in this way. So when Adam found himself in what we're calling here a covenant union with the serpent or Satan, he put his faith in the serpent's word. In other words, he became joined by faith to what the serpent said. He had turned away from, rejected, or disbelieved, or however you want to put that, what God had told him, and put his faith and his belief. He threw his lot in with the serpent, and he found himself in covenant union with the enemy of God, the spirit of error, the spirit that's now working in the sons of disobedience. So I followed up a question with my friend, and I said, as far as the spirit of error / Satan being in us, are we born with it, or does it enter each individual at the point of our individual sin, as in the age of accountability? This is getting right down in there. There is still some of this I'm a bit unclear with and wanted to get settled. This is what I'm saying here. 20 plus years into Bible study and teaching, I'm starting to zero in on some things and question some things that I've always thought, heard, and said even myself. So his response is this. This is a difficult question. Now, this is an extensive, I'm going to read all of this because I think it's so valuable to us. So, at what point are we born with this spirit of error or Satan in us, or does this spirit move into us at the point of our willful sinning, disobeying the rule of getting the gum out of our parents' purse or whatever it might be? He says this is a difficult question which the Bible may not answer as precisely as we might wish. I believe that when Adam fell, he entered into covenant union with Satan on behalf of all humanity by believing the words of the serpent rather than God's. But as to when this becomes effective individually for us is difficult to say. Some might quote Psalm 51:5, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." But this may be an example of a literary device, hyperbole, intentional exaggeration to make a point of how sinful he is, as when Paul says he is the chief of sinners. I can think of many worse sinners than Paul, like Hitler or Stalin, but he exaggerates the point to emphasize his sinfulness before his conversion. In the same way, David emphasizes that he was sinful from the time he was conceived to emphasize the depth of his sin in raping Bathsheba and murdering her husband. So Psalm 51:5 does not solve the problem. And here's where it got so great for me. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so great. Paul may answer the question, however, in Romans 7:9, where he says, "I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin came alive and I died." When Paul was alive apart from the law, presumably when he was too young to understand what the law commanded, but sin is already present in him. It is just dormant, and sin and springs to life when the commandment not to covet is understood. So I would say that Satan is present from the beginning in the infant, but is dormant or hibernating until we encounter a command, and then he springs to life in us. This probably happens the first time we disobey our parents in very early childhood, ages 1 to 3. Our initial choice to disobey confirms the covenant union with Satan in us, so that it is not just Adam's choice, but becomes our own through our own choice. Oh my God. I can't even begin to tell you how great this is to me, and I hope it's hitting you the way it did me. And then he goes on to say the difference between us and Jesus as a child is that Jesus did not have Satan in him at all, and Satan was always on the outside, even when he was an infant. As the last Adam, Jesus was unaffected by Adam's choice to sin and was entirely free from Satan's authority, though, of course, like the pre-fall Adam, he was capable of yielding to temptation and sinning, but unlike Adam, he never did so. Whoa, that is so great. So when Adam rebelled against God, he had placed his faith in the word of the serpent. So he had become joined in a covenant union with the enemy of God, the spirit of error, the spirit now working in the sons of disobedience. So that spirit brought with it death to the humanity. But each of us individually, as an individual part of humanity, if you want to put it that way, has to find a place, or does find a place at some point in early childhood for most of us, where we agree with the enemy, we rebel against authority, and we find ourselves joining ourselves into that union. Amazing. So we all make a faith decision at some point. Now, I'd like to look back at what he touched on in Romans 7, I do want to read a few verses here that kind of makes this very clear. Look in Romans 7. I want to start in verse 1. I don't know how far I'll go with this, but this really clarified a lot of things to me. Let me just say this. This is the reason for the crucifixion. This is the reason for the co-crucifying us with Christ. This is why we, in some sense, have to die with Christ in order to be raised to walk in new life. Because there's a breaking of an old covenant union so that we can actually join in to a new covenant union with Christ. Look in Romans 7, starting in 1. He says, "Or do you not know, brethren, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law has jurisdiction over a person as long as he lives. For the married woman is bound by law to her husband while he is living, but if her husband dies, she is released from the law concerning the husband. So then, if while her husband is living she is joined to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is free from the law, so that she is not an adulteress, though she is joined to another man." Now that presents a problem. All right, so it's talking about a wife and a husband, a man and a woman that are married, and the woman is in this union bound by law in this covenant union relationship with her husband, and it's for life. And she cannot and will not be able to be released from it unless her husband dies. And the husband, the analogy or the idea here is that the law itself is so demanding on this woman that she's miserable, she's under condemnation, and she can't please this husband in any kind of way. And the husband has a right to demand this law on her because it's perfect. It's a perfect union. This is the design. So she's in a quandary. She's stuck. But God provides a way for this woman, who, I'll just give you a little hint, who represents us. This female, this wife here, represents you, the reader, regardless of if you're male or female. The point here is that you human being, are in a covenant relationship, and you need to get out of it. And there's no getting out of it unless somebody dies. And God has provided the way out for us through our own death. Look at Romans 7, verse 4. "Therefore, my brethren, you, the wife, also were made to die to the law through the body of Christ, so that you might be joined to another, to him who is raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit for God." A new union, a new marriage has got to happen. But the only way it happens is a death that separates us from the other old covenant union that we find ourselves in through Adam. Verse 5, Romans 7:5, "For while we were in the flesh, the sinful passions which are aroused by the law were at work in the members of our body to bear fruit for death. But now that we've been released from the law and died to that which we were bound, so that we serve in newness of the Spirit and not in oldness of the letter." Wow. "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? May it never be. On the contrary, I would not have come to know sin except through the law, for I would not have known about the coveting if the law had not said you should not covet. But sin..." Now see, this is what you got to take into account. When you read these words, these verses in Romans 7 specifically, where it's talking about sin, and 6, 7, both of these chapters are full of the word sin, S-I-N, but this word sin is doing stuff, it's active. So I'm just going to say that here's what I think. In Ephesians 2, it says the prince of the power of the air, the spirit working in the sons of disobedience, is what Paul's referring to here as sin. And in 1 John 4, it's talking about the spirit of error, and I think that's the same thing. So I think Paul is telling us, in sort of a veiled or hidden way, it's a mysterious kind of way of talking, but the Holy Spirit will show you if you seek to know. So in Romans 7:8 it says, "But sin," the spirit of error, the one working in the sons of disobedience, "taking opportunity through the commandment, produced in me coveting of every kind. For apart from the law, sin is dead." Now, taking into account what my friend says, it says sin is dead. I think maybe it's saying that apart from the law, sin is dormant. In other words, dead meaning inactive, not energized, not alive, not operating yet. So let me read that again. Romans 7:8. "But sin, taking opportunity through the commandment," see, the commandment comes and sin comes alive in that moment. when Mama says, "Don't go in your sister's room unless she's there, unless she's home. Don't go in there when she's not home." There's something in me wants to go in there. You catch that? That commandment comes, and all of a sudden, I want to go in that. I want to go in there. Everything in me wants to do that. So it says sin takes opportunity through the commandment and produces in me coveting of every kind. For apart from the law, sin is dead or dormant. I wouldn't have thought about going in there if I wasn't told not to. Verse 9, I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin became alive and I died. Whoa. So when Adam partook of the rebellious serpent's word, he died, and sin, the spirit of error, came alive in him. That was his moment of do not go in your sister's room. Don't eat of this tree. That was the command. And when he did it, he died. He became inactive. He became dormant in a sense as far as his response to God, and he became alive to sin. Sin came alive in him, and he became in covenant union with sin. And he was no longer the one living, but sin, spirit of error, was actually the one living in him. Wow. So sin actually uses God's commands to trick us, to deceive us, and kill us off. So then Paul goes into this idea in the rest of Romans 7. He's going, so is the law bad or good? I don't understand. Well, he's saying the law is actually holy and the commandment is good. And why would it be good? Well, because now the law is there to expose this wrong spirit operating in us. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit. Let's think about this on a broader scale. Sometimes I think we get trapped in this idea and we think, it's just me and God, and sometimes people don't even think there is a devil at all, much less that he's involved in their life. They just say, well, I can sin enough on my own. I can sin but by myself. They don't even seem to think that there's an enemy at all, and that's pretty scary to be there. But Paul is saying in Romans 7, he says, look, sin is inside me, but it's dormant or not active until the thou shalt not covet comes into my view, and I realize I'm doing things I should. Wait a minute, I don't covet. Well, I'm going to try not to covet. Well, that just causes more coveting, and then you get caught in this Romans 7 spin cycle. What if? We know if we're students of the Word, we know that God gave the law to shut our mouths, hold us accountable, and to give us knowledge of sin. And in Galatians, Paul says that the law was our schoolmaster to lead us to Christ. And in James, he says it's like a mirror that shows us who and what we really are. You think about it, I think you could also say it was an x-ray, so it exposes or shows us what's going on in the inside. Maybe there's a tumor, there's some bleeding, there's something going on inside of us, broken bones that need to be fixed. Well, we can't know exactly what it is if the x-ray doesn't show us. So it's not the x-ray's fault. We shouldn't be upset with the x-ray. But the x-ray, the mirror, reveals it. So when Adam joined himself in covenant union with the serpent and he died to God, he lost his sort of a consciousness in a sense. He fell into a beastly mind. God's like, I want to rescue my people. I want my imagers to be restored to their rightful place and position and wholeness with me. So this is what sets about the whole plan of redemption. First, we have to see that we're a sinner and we need forgiveness. But upon another further deeper look, we have to realize it's more than just forgiveness. We need to be set free. We have been enslaved to Mr. Sin. Now, albeit we've done it willfully, in a sense, because we have on purpose committed this sin knowing better. But I don't think we realized what we were getting into. Most of it, we don't, we're 4 years old and we're taking something out of our mom's purse when we're told not to do it. We don't go, well, I'm going to go get in covenant union with the devil. We don't ever think like that, but he's a trickster, he's a manipulator, he's a liar. So what if God's whole thing about this was, look, I want my people forgiven, but more than that, I want them set free to be everything that I've always wanted them to be. So how in the world am I going to get them to see that they're even enslaved? They can't even see it. Well, I'm going to have to work on this deceived, independent mind that they're operating from. Oh, so Satan thinks he can be like God, so he fed that lie to humanity. So what does God do? He says, oh, all you folks think you could be like me, so here's some commandments. Here's what I'm like. Do these and you'll be like me. Man, being deceived as he is and was in Israel, specifically in this story, goes, oh yeah, Moses, you just get God to tell us what he wants us to do and we'll do it. Well, God's going, no, you won't. You don't even understand you don't even know you're enslaved. So the Apostle Paul in Romans 7 is working out for us what it looks like to come to discover that we're in the wrong covenant union with the wrong spirit. And as he starts to awaken to it, he starts saying things like Romans 7:15, for what I'm doing, I don't understand. I'm not practicing what I'd like to do, but I'm doing the very thing I hate. But if I do the very thing I do not want to do, I agree with the law, confessing that the law is good. So now, no longer am I the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. Oh, he's all of a sudden separating him. Now he realizes it's not I'm here, sin is in me, but sin isn't I. I and sin are two different things. Sin is dwelling in me. Verse 18, for I know that nothing good dwells in me. And then he says, that is in my flesh. Now he's separating the me from his flesh. For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. So he first sees that sin is in him, and it's really sin operating this thing out, doing this. It's not me. Then he goes, there's nothing good in me. That is in my flesh, where that sin is dwelling. See how God's doing some supernatural spirit surgery on Paul, and he's unveiling it, revealing it to him. What's really happening here, Paul, is that you have been in a union with the wrong spirit, and I'm here to get you free. Verse 19, for the good that I want I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want to do. But if I'm doing the very thing I do not want, I'm no longer the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. See, he repeats that because he's starting to realize there's something else operating in me, what I would call the spirit of error. I'm going to leave it right there. I would advise you, I would challenge you, whatever you want to say, to read Romans 6, 7, and 8 again. And read it with the idea that Adam kind of brought us into a covenant union with the wrong spirit. Even though we, as an individual, did at some point in our life sign the contract. We did agree with it, which finds us enslaved to Mr. Sin, the spirit that's now working in the sons of disobedience. But there is a way out, and it's through the cross. Jesus Christ came into this world to save sinners. He came in to inaugurate or initiate a new covenant in his blood, a brand new covenant union. That's so great. But it only is established, it's only brought about through the cross. We can't have what he offers us until the person leaving it to, in Hebrews it says that a person who writes a will leaves all their stuff to somebody. Well, the stuff don't get transferred until that person dies. So Jesus Christ went to the cross to inaugurate, to initiate, to begin, to start a brand new covenant union with mankind for all that will by faith choose his word over the serpents. Therefore, breaking the old union and joining in a brand new one, just like it says in Romans 7, this woman needs to get a new husband. She can't be single, according to the way in the analogy. There's no single women. Sorry. There's no single people. There's no independent people. We are all in a union. It's either not I but sin, or it's not I but Christ. That's all we get. That's the only two options we get. So through the cross, the Bible says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives. And now the life that I'm living in this bodily, fleshy body, I'm living by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So it's really not I, but it's Christ. But it's a Christ I. It's me one with him. 1 Corinthians 6:17 says, he that's joined to the Lord is one spirit. And that's what we're after. This is all about a covenant union and being joined, becoming one with Christ again. And it only happens when we finally see, when God finally backs us into a corner and opens our eyes so that we can see that we've been enslaved this whole time and we need more than forgiveness. We need to be rescued. The Apostle Paul finally cried out in Romans 7, "O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from the body of this death?" And then he said, "Oh, I thank God through Jesus Christ." And he realized the cross has already delivered him. And he no longer has to be the one to live, but Christ is now living. And Christ is his life, and Christ is your life. When you get into this spirit covenant union with God through the cross, through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Wow. I hope this has helped you. I hope I've described this clear. I hope that you can be edified and grow up in your understanding. And I pray that you would go and recheck, re-educate yourself on what this is all about, what the Bible story, what our history, what God and man's story and plan is, and how much greater it is to be delivered or rescued than just merely forgiven. All right, thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next Louis File. See you soon.